Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. I'm filming this during the day. My kid is at school. In fact, I have to go pick her up soon. But again, I find time when I can film because she's napping. She's napping. Like late in the afternoon, so she's not going to bed till like 9 o'clock and driving me bonkers. Because suddenly she's napping at 4. But let's get on to this. Why I have the time. So this is Anne of the Winnie Poplars. So in the series, this fits between Anne of the Island and Anne's House of Dreams. Publication-wise, this was not published until 1936. So this, along with Anne of Ingleside, are kind of, they're the odd ones out in the series because this is when L.M Montgomery kind of did some fill-in. Because if I just looked at the Wikipedia, she did Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea, Anne of the Island, Anne's House of Dreams. Then she did Rainbow Valley, which has to do with kids. And then she did Rill of Ingleside. And then in 36, she published this. And then she did, a couple years later, she did Anne of Ingleside, and I think she published Anne of Ingleside came out in like 39, and then she died in like 42. So yeah, these were fill-ins. So let's go over what this is. So at this point, Anne is about 22. Her and Gilbert are engaged. He's finishing medical school, so he's back at Redmond College. So he's still there. He has 3 years of medical school to complete. You don't really see much of him here. So Anne has taken over, and I'm not as familiar with how the school system works in Canada or how it worked during this time period, but she has the job of principal, but she's also still teaching, which in my experience was something that was done when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Romania. The principal and the vice principal taught. That seems to be the way it is done here, though I think there's only 3 teachers. So she's in a town called, I believe, Somerville is where she's at. Or Summerside. So, yeah, she has her Bachelor of Arts degree, and she's a principal of Summerside High School. So now a lot of this book takes the form of her letters to Gilbert. You obviously don't hear anything about him, but these are her letters to Gilbert, and otherwise there's certain things going on. It's split into 3 parts: her first year, second year, and her third year. Because again, she's signed on just to do the 3 years between basically biding her time until Gilbert finishes medical school. So she stays in a house. She ends up coming up. She stays in a house called the Winnie Poplars on Spooks Lane. So she's still on Prince Edward Island. So this is it's just a different town. And so she's in this town. She's housing with these 2 little old ladies and their Rebecca Dew, who is their kind of housemaid and their friend. And you have, I can't remember the name of the little old women in this book. They're absolutely, utterly hilarious. And it's a fun cast of characters in here. So, and yeah, Aunts Kate and Chatty. Those are the names of the women. They're both widows in this town. And this town is run by a very specific, very large family who were not particularly happy, the Pringles, that she was hired, because the little old ladies in the town had some second cousin who had gone up for the position and he hadn't been hired. So these Pringles are against her in the very beginning. And so she's dealing with the kids in her class. She's dealing with the families. They're kind of inviting her over. They don't like her, but they're nice to her in public. Their kids are kind of snide. and Anne's trying to basically struggle against them. She also has the vice principal, a woman by the name of Catherine, who's very prim and very proper and doesn't seem to like humans, or anyone. She's an interesting character as well. There's a lot of interesting characters in this book. And so the first part of the first year is Anne dealing with it, getting used to being there, teaching, dealing with these Pringles, until she's doing some research and she interacts with somebody. I can't remember how this comes about, but she finds a document that talks about the old lady's ancestors, who basically they're the matriarchs of the Pringle family, and she sends it to them. And all of a sudden, because it talks a lot about their ancestor, she was kind of looking for interesting information of the disgraced uncle, but this document has far more detailed information on this ancestor. Well, this makes the Pringles happy. And all of a sudden she's being invited and she's won them over, and all of a sudden they're very, very nice people to her. So that's kind of an interesting thing. She also does, they do a drama club, and during that time, this is when she's still fighting with the Pringles. I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Let me double check here, because a lot of these, again, they're letters to Gilbert. Yes, Pringle, Pringle. If I'm not pronouncing this correctly, Canadians, chime in, because it looks like Pringle to me. But I'm just a West Coast American. I'm not Canadian. But this isn't French either, because again, this is Prince Edward Island. It's off the coast of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. New Brunswick? Yes, I think so. So, nonetheless, so they do a drama club, and the main character, I think they're doing something with Mary Queen of Scots, which was very, very popular back then. Queen Elizabeth I has overshadowed her in media recently, but back at that time, everybody seemed obsessed with Mary Queen of Scots, which you are not aware of. One, you need history. Sorry, I'm getting a real cold here. But she was Queen Elizabeth's the first distant cousin who was Catholic, who Queen Elizabeth had executed because she was found in a plot trying to basically steal the throne and have Elizabeth assassinated. But moving on. But this Pringle girl, who's supposed to play the main character, pretends to be sick. Now, on the side, Anne had been tutoring another girl who wanted to be part of the drama club. She was obsessed with Mary Queen of Scots, but she couldn't afford it. So Anne tutors her, pays her dues into the drama club, and she ends up taking over the spot. And then, of course, it's kind of funny. It says almost when we find out this information in the letter to Gilbert, and she goes on to become a famous American actress, apparently. Moving on. So that's kind of cool as this makeup story here. Eventually she gets the Pringles on her side and becomes friends with them, as I said. And then we go into dealing with Catherine, who's the vice principal. And Anne, being Anne, invites her back, I think it's for the summer, to Green Gables, because she does spend the holidays back home, back with Marilla and Miss Lynn, and of course the twins, Dora and Davy. So she goes home, and then of course she sees Diana, who, good God, I don't know how many kids she has, like 4 at that point. I think she had like 4 kids at this point, and is obviously very married, and has been for a while. So, moving on. So she brings this woman back, and she finds out her backstory. Her parents didn't want her when she was a child, and then they died, and they were fighting all the time, so they made it clear they hated her. And so she was given as a poor relation to aunts, an aunt and uncle, and they pretty much treated her like crap. It's like, you're a poor relation, we're going to give you our send-offs. She was able to go to Queen's College to study education, but her uncle made her pay back every cent. And at the time Anne invites her, she had just finished paying off her uncle, and she was finally free. So Anne helps her become less prim and less proper, and kind of lets her put her hair down and stop feeling angry and guilty and feeling horrible about herself. It's like, no, you're free. You need to live your life now. And they become very close friends. And Catherine is a very, very interesting character. And then the other kind of character that you've been involved with is a little girl who lives next door by the name of Elizabeth. She lives with her grandmother, and then whether it's like an elderly great aunt or what, she calls her the woman, is how she's done. Her mother had died, her father is off in France. So, and she meets with Anne frequently, and this little girl is very, very sheltered. Her grandmother doesn't see anything wrong with how they're raising her. It's like, yep, we give you food, we give you clothes. It doesn't matter if we don't let you go play with other kids or anything. She's a little girl. So Anne meets with her. And you have all the various other characters, and you go through these kind of couple of years with Anne going back and forth to the holidays, seeing Davy and Dora grow up. Catherine actually bonds with Davy. It's like Dora's just kind of boring, which she is. The Dora is boring. I think in later books she just gets married. I think Davy does some other stuff. He grows up, but he's still very, very mischievous. So, and Catherine with a K, bonds with him because he's extremely interesting. So you have that whole saga, and things that go on. And so it goes through these 3 years of Anne dealing with these different things and teaching and stuff like that. And then obviously the Pringles like her. Catherine ends up leaving the school after the end of Anne's, I think, second year. And then she goes off to secretarial school. So she goes back to Queens and takes the secretarial school. And it basically says Anne gets a letter from her before she leaves, that she is got hired as a secretary of a man who does a lot of traveling. So she's going to be gone from dowdy school teacher who hates everybody, who scowls and has no friends, and nobody thought she was pretty, and to globetrotting as a secretary, which actually sounds pretty interesting. The thing that happens with little Elizabeth is eventually Anne writes her father. And eventually, I think there's a scene where basically Anne takes her with her to talk to somebody, and little girl's waiting outside for Anne, and she meets a gentleman, and she kind of runs in the street and is scared by some horses and faints. And it turns out this gentleman is her father. And he had gotten a letter from Anne saying what's going on with her, and he decides to take her with him, and he's going to go to Boston. So he's the grandmother and the older woman who's like her caretaker or something are not particularly happy about this, but obviously this young Elizabeth is extremely happy. She's finally able to go off with her dad, and she's going to have a much better life. And then of course Anne's going to go home, and she's going to get married. So it's an interesting, very fun addition to the story. I think L.M Montgomery was correct in putting this in here, because then you get this bridge of what Anne is doing in this 3-year gap. Because remember, at the end of Anne of the Island, Gilbert tells her, it's like, I still have 3 more years of medical school. So you figure out what the heck Anne is doing during these 3 years. And she's basically a principal of a high school. So she goes back to teaching. Obviously, she's getting more money than she's been. I'm assuming Somerville is a much larger town than Avonlea. More of a metropolitan town than Avonlea. So I'm not sure what it's based off of, but again, it's interesting to see what goes on during this 3-year period between our last seeing of Anne and Gilbert getting engaged to them getting married. So she fills in that 3-year gap. So if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. I will be finishing off this series, going through even the short stories and Sullivan films and the Road to Avonlea TV series. So this Wendy Poplars, Anne of Avonlea, and Anne of the Island are the inspiration for the continuing story. So that, you guys should be able to go watch that now. That will have been filmed by the time I do this, because I shot it and I realized I should redo it, just because I wanted to read all 3 books again, just to see where they take it from. Most of it, oddly enough, is from this. So if you want to wait and rewatch that video, watch my book reviews of Anne of Avonlea, Anne of the Island, and then this, and then watch the video, my review on the and the continuing story. It's going to make more sense, because that's where a lot of it's taken from, though I will talk about that in video. All right, I need to go pick up my kid. So again, like and subscribe, leave a positive comment if you have one. Check out what I've got. I have a huge backlog. I have a ton of stuff coming, all sorts of book series. I'm going to finish this one. I'm moving on to the Boxcar Children. I do film opposites. Again, check out what I got. Okay? Thank you.